What's up, everybody? My name is Scott Unruh, and I'll be your guest host while Ian is out at GDC right now. So, anyway, I'm a motion designer here in Denver, Colorado. I've been a 3D printer for pretty much my COVID hobby. It was one of those things where I wasn't a massive fan of 3D printing until the resin printers came out. And then once I was able to get those details and all that sweetness, I was really, really hooked from the beginning. I ended up doing a lot of just miniatures for Warhammer and things like that, and just having a lot of fun painting. And then eventually I turned to realize that I could print my own stuff. And when the NFT boom kind of came out, I was having a bunch of artists reach out to me, and they were doing their NFTs, and I was printing them and kind of giving them out to to the holders and things like that. So it was a lot of fun, but it definitely tested my ability to go back and forth from Cinema 4D into ZBrush and then back into Cinema to print it and things like that. So it was a lot of learning and a lot of like trial by fire, because people wanted their NFTs printed. So this was kind of one of the things. This was from EJ Hassenfras. A lot of people know him from a lot of the different streams, and this is from a very talented artist named Ryan Talbot. And once I got done with those, these were the 3D printed pieces that we finally produced and gave out and things like that. So it was a lot of fun. What One of the biggest kind of challenges from going from one realm to the other is a lot of those textures were in Redshift. So, and it was on smooth geo, things like that. So we did we kind of had to do all the things of like figuring out how to like map those textures back on, and it was a lot of painting and things like that. So that was really what a lot of this was about, is learning this whole thing. In my recent kind of work, I've been doing these little robots, and this is the one that I'm going to kind of go over right now, and I'll even show him because he's like right over here. So he's the final printed piece. And yeah, I'm going to definitely just go through my whole like kind of workflow and how I ended up getting these guys. Here's my little Death Knight that I also created and printed. He actually turned out a lot of fun as well. So yeah, we're just gonna kind of dive into it all. And then also I ended up taking a lot of these, and Clinton Jones has his ethereal ascent challenge, and I ended up basically taking that and turning this into into a little animation that was a lot of fun to work on. So we can go through a lot of that workflow where I'm going from one to the other, back and forth into 3D printing. You can map that 3D printed detail. You can map that onto your surface again, and then you can put that into Substance Painter and just do, the world is really a lot of pretty much anything you want to do, at this point. So yeah, so usually when I go into these things, I start in Cinema. I do that for a few different reasons, and mostly for coming out of the motion graphics part of it was the hardest part for me was scale. You don't really realize when you're doing digital artwork and things like that. A lot of times scale isn't on your mind in those things, because you're buying assets for buildings and things like that, and they're all different scales. And then even like between working with different artists, I was the same thing where I didn't know the scale. So for me, it was easiest to just come in and really just drop in a cube. I know that this cube is 100 centimeters, which is basically the size of a Funko Pop. And that started me off with a very easy realm of being able to, it gives me something to start with. And so I would take, something from EJ and put it in, and then we could scale it up, scale it down, whatever. And then that way I know where I'm kind of working with. So yeah, and then a lot of it too, when I go into, when I started this little guy, there was a Gnomon. This goes back, so this is going to age me. So this is before Gnomon actually had a website. I actually had CDs, and there was one of the artists was basically did a robot course, and he did nothing but black and white sketches, and he would just produce hundreds of these at a go. And for me, that's where I kind of learned my quick concepting. And so this original character, he was designed as kind of my two favorite games growing up as a kid were obviously Super Mario and then Mega Man. So I kind of wanted to start this whole series of these robots where I was taking classic things and mashing them into a Mega Man style. So I took Toad from Mario Brothers and put him into what he would be if he were a boss fight in Mega Man. And so this is kind of the concept that I came up with. Gave him a little bit of, since being here in Denver, Colorado, I gave him a little mountain hippie feel, kind of made him a little wanderer through, and was able to kind of tell that backstory through that a little bit, and just kind of add to the lore of him a little bit. So yeah, that's kind of what I ended up doing from that. And so really, when I go into you can go in through, let's see here, go in through configure, and this gets your go to the back, and then you can add your guy in through here, and you can kind of change, all your settings. So you're here, adjust the scale of everything. And then that way you've got your, you bring your block back in so you know how big you are. And then really I just go in and I start doing low poly, just topology, just to get my base shapes going. And then that way I know what my scale is as far as just my proportions and things like that. I just want to nail that. Learning how to sculpt with clay as a kid, I definitely learned how to do things in levels. You've got your base shapes, your secondary shapes, tertiary shapes, and then your fine details. I've carried that kind of knowledge through my ZBrush sculpting. I do a lot of, I see a lot of people where they just throw the clay ball out there and just start pushing and pulling pixels until they get what they want. I can't do that. I would love to be able to do that. That's definitely one way of going about it, but I have to break it down into different shapes. So I break these things down into the lowest poly shapes as possible. Once I have these set up in Cinema, usually what I'll do is just go up to the old Go Z, and this thing is really, really amazing as far as just flipping things back and forth. I know a lot of people that do this that will, that are maybe uncomfortable with the way ZBrush handles its folder structure. And so I know a lot of people that will actually send things back and forth into Cinema to keep things, because you can definitely go in, control group, and you can have different groups within things, and it definitely helps manage your folders a lot better. But using that Go Z plugin, just zipping things back and forth is amazing. So yeah, so really once I get these back in, I've got my rough shapes. I'm now in ZBrush, and for me it's easiest now. You can just go subdivide with the D, Shift D and D brings it back and forth, and that really starts kind of now taking shape with all your different pieces. And that really gets in my first version of this character. And then from there, once I've got my first base proportions in, I really go in and just start adding different details to this whole thing. You know, if I want to make this my mushroom, go ahead and subdivide him up. Start making my spots. I can already tell that I'm not going to like this because I'm going to get a lot of chunkiness. So I don't mind going in and dividing that up even more. There we go. One of the other tricks is take up your intensity and then take your draw size, but then also you can move your focal shift so you get that harder edge. Get in there and just draw my spots. Oops, too much. I'm definitely having some inflation problems, aren't we all? There we go. Just make it subtle. Give it a nice little smooth. And then genuinely just work through it all. This is going to be my, you know, that's kind of second layer of details where I'm just going in and just adding all those extra little fun little things. One of the other things that you really need to worry about too is when you're starting to create these characters, you got to really start thinking about your balance. That was one of the worst parts, you know, one of the worst learning curves that I had, because you'd spend all this time working on this character and his feet would be too small or head would be too big. And what would end up happening is you print it out and then it would fall over. I know there's nothing worse that, you know, for the action figure people out there that have this really cool action figure and they want to put it on their desktop, that it falls over constantly. So that is one thing that you definitely want to go through and just kind of think about too. So, you know, starting out, it's a lot easier to make, you know, bigger feet. That kind of grounds things down. But also when you finally go into posing, you definitely want to go in and, you know, you want to go in and make sure that, you know, you're balanced. You know, your center of weight, your center of gravity is right down the middle here. And so if he's leaning forward, you want to definitely get in there and put a foot back and put a foot forward and spread out his legs. So that way that way it balances when you print it out. Because like I said, there's nothing worse in the world than putting all this time and effort and then printing it out and then realizing that, you know, this thing doesn't stand on its own. Also, you know, you can put a base on it and things like that, and I'll definitely go into that part of it. Coming down, you definitely have a lot to go over when this thing breaks down as far as everything goes. But really, I'm just gonna start going through and playing with these different shapes and really trying to make them, you know, do their thing. And just slowly start working my way down from one to the next to the next to the next detail. Really is all I'm doing at this point. It's pretty, you know, very important. One of the big things that you want to definitely do while you're doing this is keep your polygroups, because what that's going to do down the road is going to make it so you can you know, when you go in to do the fine detailing and things like that, it's going to make your masking a lot easier down the road. But yeah, I'm just going to really go in there and hash out details. I use a lot of when I'm doing these low poly breakouts, I definitely go in and really love using the Z remesher or the Z modeler to just go in, do my loops. And again, make sure you keep these guys live. Give a little bevel in there. To get those nice crispy edges. Like I said, I just work my way down. One of the things I like to do is also, once you're, you know, one of the tricks to getting some clothing in here, he's got a little vest in his in the sketch. So I always duplicate it. Divide that up a lot. Get me a lot of stuff in there. Forgot to turn on my symmetry. Go in and make him a nice little vest. Go into your masking. You can smooth this out a little bit. Oop. Not sure what happened there. And then from there, I actually like to go in and split that out. Go into your geometry and Z-remesh that out. Oh, that's my problem. I did a very sloppy job of masking this out, so it left me with a lot of little chunks of things that weren't fun. Now let's try it again. Split unmasked. That looks a lot better. I've got a lot of little chunkies in there. Again, starts the level of the vest. And I just, again, keep working my way down, building up these details. Bring that down. Q-mesh. Definitely these little guys are gonna keep it ugly. So a lot of times you'll have to kind of go in and delete these polys. That's just not working with the symmetry. Bridge them back in. There we go. Oop, forgot that little guy. Bring him back. There we go. And that's going to make your, when you actually go to Q-mesh this and extend this out, it's going to make it a lot prettier. There we go. Go in, give it a little bevel so it cleans up these edges really nicely. A lot of times I'll go in and just remove these extra polygon or these extra lines just to keep it really smooth. There we go. Now, one of the things that I noticed when I started initially creating this was that my center line, this foot is definitely going over the center line. So once I start doing, you know, doing the symmetry and flipping it to the other side, his feet would get messed up and mushed in. So, you know, go in and, you know, just clean that up a little bit. And yeah, and as I work my way down, I eventually slowly end up with something a little more like this. And again, just adding more and more detail as we go. That's kind of a lot of the beauty of ZBrush, is that I don't go into a lot of the, you know, there's all these menus up here, and I don't ever need to even really go into them. I can get pretty much what I want because it is just running clay and actually just doing its thing. It's, you don't have to get super fancy with anything. It's, you know, you can get by with just a handful of brushes and really actually get out there and really make some amazing and fun stuff. You know, and then once you get to a spot where you do the fine details, these out. I kept my polygroups. Mask that out. Then you can go into your surface, noise. I've created a bunch of different ones for this particular guy, so you can open him up. I had this checkerboard pattern. And then again, that's kind of the value of keeping your polygroups in one spot and keeping them alive. That way you can just really go back in and change these things on a whim and add your details. Convert to PPR to Geo. That kind of bakes it down. And then really between like orb cracks and all your other little things is this is where you get to start telling, you know, the fine details of your story. You know, this guy was in a fight, so maybe he, you know, start drawing in your scratches. You know, and as Bob Ross would say, let the happy accidents go. And again, you can just tell those stories of dents and, you know, what this character went through. You know, it's a whole nother level of storytelling. You know, maybe this guy has a little broken heart. And again, I just go back and forth. I really like to work as a whole and start from one, you know, I like to see it as a whole piece. It's so easy to get locked in as a sculptor to one little particular area and noodle that until, you know, it's perfect. But then what ends up happening is a lot of times I was once listening to something from Ian McKegg, and he is a fantastic, he created all the like a lot of the characters for Star Wars and things like that. And he has this one thing that he likes to refer to as murdering your darlings. It's a very like grim way of thinking about your artwork, but there's a lot of times when you're in there sculpting and you have the perfect hand or the perfect finger and you start trying to make everything around it work, and eventually the problem is it doesn't work and you keep rehashing and redoing it. And a lot of times the problem isn't with the thing around it that you can't get right. It's because the thing that's right is wrong. So it's okay to like scrap the thing that you really, really love and spent some time on. And it's a very powerful thing to like really get in there and actually like tear that apart and start over. Don't be afraid to start over, even though something is perfect in the way you really, really like it. You know, you can, you know, that's what saving copies and doing things like that is for. But then eventually, you know, you get to make his little accessories. So I created this little staff for him. And again, it started out as the you know, the very basic geometry of things. That I just kept pushing and pulling. Adding little bevels so my things are, you know, sharp. And then again, just went back through that secondary and tertiary, you know, details, you know, until I ended up with something a little closer to this. Was able to draw in my little wood textures, add textures through different kind of, you know, through that same surface menu by selecting and deselecting different parts. And then eventually, after a lot of back and forth, I ended up with this little guy. You know, he originally didn't have a backpack, but again, leaning into that story of him being kind of this little nomadic guy that was wandering the woods of this little imaginary place that I created. Gave him a little backpack. You know, so little cloth sims on everything to kind of push and pull and wrinkle everything up. You know, carried the this weaving pattern through all of his different little parts. And then eventually got him to a point where I could pose him, sculpted this little rock. I kept everything pretty much separate. That way, I didn't go into T-pose on this one. That's something that I'm not super comfortable with as far as my skill set, but I was able to go in and just push and pull and, you know, make selections and then go back in once I made the bend to go back in, sculpt it back out, add the detail back in. Again, making sure that, you know, the weight of the head, so he was balanced, so he doesn't tip over. Again, I can't stress how important that is to really make, you know, to make your piece like just look better, you know, when it's sitting on your desk. And then just basically like with what Ian went over in his first one, made the keys. So, you know, his little foot goes in there. Ian was doing the squares. I don't know. I like the hexagons and octagons for mine. But you can definitely just do a square. So yeah, and then everything, you know, just goes into its thing. When you're breaking this apart, though, the one thing that I also like to do is I break my things apart based on how I'm going to paint them or how I'm planning on painting them. So, for instance, I could have printed this as one piece. I didn't like the idea of having to go in and trying to get underneath this part of it. So I actually printed this out in two separate pieces. So then you can just go in and paint this separately, paint this separately. You can even break this apart further. But yeah, think about how you want to paint it. That's a pretty important part of how you break things apart. Ian was talking about how you do things based on the hide your seams within cracks and things like that, which you definitely want to do. But luckily, that's in a lot of ways that's where the painting ends up being a line anyway. So you can hide that crack with a little bit of paint, get it in there. Yeah, so like his backpack is a separate piece that plugs back in. Just so you can kind of see how everything kind of puts together. Again, I didn't want to have to go in there with a paintbrush and really try to get in there and do that. It was so much easier to have this as a separate piece, paint that, glue it on, gives you a lot cleaner lines and things like that as well. Usually, like this hand was a separate piece. And some of these I didn't put keys on just because when I went to bool this out, it actually made like it almost made its own key because it is kind of a square shaped anyway. So once it was booled out, it actually worked out really well. When you are booling these things out, the one thing you definitely want to look for is your little overhangs. So in a lot of times when you bool out your your backpack so it sits in there nicely, you'll have little things that you got to remember that these when you go to print this out, it's going to be on a hard surface. Like this resin is it's really solid. There's not a whole lot of give. So if you end up having a little hook that comes out, you can't fit it in there nicely. So you have to go in there and smooth it out or cut things out and separate it. Or else you're going to have to sand it down when you get the print and you realize that like, oh, that doesn't fit anymore because there's this little overhang that I forgot to cut out. But yeah, so he ended up being just like this. And yeah, I'm definitely super happy with him. I'm very happy with the way he turned out. It was one of those where he started as something I didn't really like it, but then once I started putting a lot more of me into it, it rang a lot better. And that was part of me leaning into the mountain hippie aspect and creating a better story around him. So that was one of those things that you take your experiences and put them into your characters. It's going to show through and it's going to resonate with people. But yeah, and a lot of these I can take them back into, you can go these back in. You can take these in, and then a lot of times you go into Substance Painter. It's an amazing workflow that you can definitely take your 3D prints and put them into the digital world, and take your digital prints and put them into the 3D world, and it's so much fun. It really is like an amazing journey that I've been kind of going through on this. You know, I was able to even like take him and link him up to some mocap data, give him a little bit of extra life, which is, you know, just again, it's so much fun to be able to just take these little characters and do almost anything you want with them. You know, when I go into Substance Painter, I might have opened up too many things. One of the other things you do need to realize is when you are printing these, there is a thing called a slicer. And for depending on which every brand of printer has its own different slicer. The one that I have is a Frozen Mighty 4K, and that has one called Chitubox. And you can import your head here. The one thing with these slicers is you do want to dynamesh everything down into one piece. It's really easy to have like intersecting geometry and things like that, but what you end up wanting to do is you want to break apart, especially with these 3D printers. You want to hollow these things out, and Chitubox does a really good job of being able to hollow those out. But the problem is it has to be one mesh. You know, you can go in, you can determine the wall thickness, but once it does this stuff, you can see here that if you have intersecting geometry, a lot of times it doesn't know what to do with it. So it gives you a lot of little chunky things that just don't, the software doesn't like it. So it is easiest to dynamesh it down, maybe even decimate it down to, you know, lower the polys depending on how what kind of a piece it is. I kept these pretty high as far as, you know, I think this one's 1 million polys as far as his head goes. But that way you can go in and it definitely gives it one nice clean mesh. The other thing that's very important that you want to do is you want to put a hole in it. And the reason for that is that these resin printers will definitely fill up with resin in those holes. And as your print over time, that resin kind of off gases into that. And so a lot of times your prints will explode because there's uncured, and then it'll leave a puddle of resin everywhere. So this gives you a way of letting that resin drain out. It saves you on, you know, hollowing things out. It just makes it a lot easier because a lot of these printers, they print from the top down. So it's dipping in and then pulling it out. So as these get bigger and bigger and bigger, they get heavier and heavier and heavier. And that weight can actually affect your print as far as it sticking to the build plate. It can also cause little suction cups depending on, you know, how things go. So you want to definitely go in and, you know, make these things, you know, to a point where you can put in holes. You can hide different parts of these, because when you go into to do your final, your final support system, you're going to leave a lot of these little tiny little divots that I don't know if you can see them or not, but there's these little tiny divots that you want to hide as best as possible too. So you want to keep them on the underside of things, and you want to put them on the back of things where so you may have to go in and rotate this around to where more of these supports are going to be hidden, or they're going to hit this bottom part here. There you go. So you can see a lot less supports and a lot less sanding and filling in little holes and things like that. And so this will print, definitely a lot nicer and save you a lot of hassle down the road. So yeah, anyway, that's kind of what I've got going on. I just see, let's look at some of the questions here in the chat. So we got one, let's see, constantly searching for clients in the field of 3D printing. It's a bit tricky to find clients. So I have any tricks on where I should approach potential clients? That's going to be a very interesting thing coming down the road. There's so many more things that are going to be happening with 3D printing. The 3D printing world is constantly evolving and changing, and it feels like every day there's a brand new part of 3D printing that's going to happen here. That there's some new, I don't know, they're 3D printing hamburgers. Like, so finding those clients for me in the future looking forward is going to be keeping up on all the new trends on the printers, and really just going out there and finding out what you can do. Like you can obviously go the toy route, but that seems like a pretty limited thing. But there's people that are going to want signage for their logos, so you can create logo signage for people. You can a lot of people just really enjoy like having their, we live in this digital world where most of our portfolios are on a thumb drive, and it's really cool because it saves you a ton of space. But at the same time, what do you do with a thumb drive to show people what you're doing? So I would say, that's one of the ways going forward. I had a chance but yeah, thank you everybody that enjoyed my little mushroom guy. He was a ton of fun to create. I really enjoyed making him. I mean, it was one of those where a lot of things came around to where it was like, oh yeah, this is fun. This is amazing. I'm really happy with the way this guy turned out, and usually as artists, we're so, pretty nihilistic on our own artwork anyway, as far as hating it, loving it, and then hating it again, and then loving it, and then going back to it, and then hating it. So this is one that I'm really happy with. I think I'll love this guy for a long time. So thank you very much. I also have him set up as, here, I'll put him in the chat. I actually have the a minifig factory. So I put that in the chat. If you want to go download him, he's up there for free. Print him away and have fun with him. And yeah, do what you want to do with him. Animate him, do whatever. Let's see, I got a bunch of my friends that showed up. Hey, Jags, how you doing? Nick is there. Kelsey, hi. Hey, Marcus. Luis showed up and Jacob. There's Shannon. How you doing? Shannon is probably one of my favorite artists. Go check him out, Shannon Wilkerson. He's amazing at his craft. But pretty much all these. I mean, there's so much talent here. It's amazing. It blows me away every day of this community and how fast it's evolving and how good people are getting. It really is a cool thing. And doing the 3D printing part of it is one of those things that have made me feel like, you know, I kind of found my niche as far as like what I can do. But yeah, thank you all for hanging out with me for this hour. If anyone has any other questions, I'll be more than happy to try to do what I can to answer them. My next thing that I'm making, I'm going to stick with the robot thing. I've got a couple different little guys. I have a Wolverine version of a Wolverine Mega Man mashup that I really want to do. That's been sitting in my brain for a long time. So yeah, well, that's hopefully going to be the next one. I might have another little just different kind of robot. I was kind of enjoying the idea of Mega Man and D&D characters getting mixed up together. So maybe doing a paladin or something like that. Can resin printers print clear? Yes, they can. There are, again, this is a technology that's evolving day by day. There are some clear resins that are out there. When you're printing them, you have to do a lot of different calibrations, just because what the printing is you've got the resin and then you've got a UV light, and usually the resin's like a thick kind of goo, and it doesn't dissipate the light. The clear resins actually, you know, kind of disperse a little bit, so you have to go in and dial in your clear resin a little bit. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do, but I've seen people pull out some amazing clear resins. But yeah, if you can definitely, you know, resins mix and match. You know, you don't have to buy the resin for the printer, but you do need to calibrate the resin for the printer. How much can Chitubox parameters and settings influence the print result? A lot, actually. Again, it depends on how, you know, each printer is a little bit different in the way it can handle different prints. There's a lot of different settings you can dial things in. You can you definitely, well, I guess we could go over here. You know, when you go into the final part of it, and you know, you've got your settings, so you've got all these different parts of, you know, you can dial in your resin. You can actually punch in your cost of your resin per milliliter. There's all of these different things. So your layer height is basically your resolution, if that makes any sense. So think of every layer as a pixel or something like that. So if you have smaller pixels, you have better resolution to get in and do the details. Bigger, you know, bigger layer height means a thicker pixel. That's why the resin printers is so much better, because the filament printers is like a glue gun. So you can get only what won't clog up that little extruder coming out. But the resin, it's a layer of liquid, so you can get a lot more stuff out of it. A lot of things that are going to affect your print is really how you set it up, as far as, you know, if you were to take this one and you know, this one seems to be a pretty good like layer as far as, you know, nice little angles. You want to keep the angles because if you have flat surfaces, again, it's picking up and pulling down, picking up and pulling down. So a lot of times you'll get little holes where you want this resin to drain out, but also that picking up and pulling down creates a suction. So you'll get a little, and again, that's since you're every time it's pulling that, you're going to start falling off of your bed plate a little, you know, little bit by little bit, and eventually your print fails because it does fall off the bed plate and get stuck to it. Can you tint clear resin? Yes, you can. You absolutely can. I've seen people put like mica powder in their resin, and you can get different dyes. Reynolds Advanced Materials is where I usually go. We have one in Denver, and they sell silicones and resins and things like that, and they have UV resins that you can use, and UV tints that work really well, as you know, work in there as well. So yeah. The next live will be, well, we'll do, Ian will be back next week, next Monday. He's at GDC right now, so he will, so he'll be back next week, and he'll do his last part of this series in 3D printing. And then I'm sure he'll have his other, I think he does one on Wednesday that he does his live streams, that he'll have another one of those. Hey, Rev showed up. How you doing, Rev? Luis wants to see a Mushroom Man Hulk. I can do that. I think I can come up with something like that. How long I've been working in computer graphics? I've been in computer graphics for probably 15 years now. I started in cinema, to where I was just a motion graphics guy and learning that whole thing through After Effects and back into cinema. I didn't really become like a 3D printing sculptor guy until pretty much COVID. That was my COVID hobby. And again, that showed up when I discovered like how good resin printing has gone. I didn't, you know, I never really was into it because it was the old chunky, you know, the filament printers that just didn't look good. And I really hate sanding things. So you sand away your detail, and it was really like depressing, and, you know, as far as that goes. But then once I saw the 3D printers, the resin ones, and saw the detail, I was hooked, and I've been off to the races ever since. You can go get your free pat in the chat now. There's you can get a ZBrush t-shirt. So where do I think the future of printing will go? That is interesting as far as where AI goes with it. You know, once we get into a realm where Turbo Squid is now, you know, you can mid-journey a model and take it into Turbo Squid, and it can create the you know, all the model for you. That's going to be a very interesting thing as far as what our future is, as far as sculptors and things like that. It's definitely scary for sure, but at the same time, there is a lot to, you know, there's going to be a lot of cleanup. I don't think a client is going to want to be okay with a lot of the things that AI can't do, just because, you know, we want to get in there and we really want to be we want our hands in it. Like, you know, no one in this chat's had a client that said, oh, that's perfect the first time. And I don't think you can just keep regenerating from AI to get those fine little things that clients want. So I do believe there is a real solid future for ZBrush artists in just cleaning up models. As far as like the industry in general, I mean, they're 3D printing houses now with concrete and things like that, and they can make them a lot faster than your average builder. So there's so many amazing things coming out as far as pieces that that are going to be, and it's just really it's just going to be following technology and who's got the newest thing that someone didn't think about. There's between welding metals and things like that. So yeah, no, I mean, I'm excited for it. It's going to be a lot of fun, and you don't have to buy the 3D, you don't have to buy the Cruelty, or the resin printer. You can go out and I know I've been working with EJ Hassenfras a little bit on his printer, and he just got a Bamboo Labs. It's multicolor, and it's actually, the technology on that thing has gotten really, really good. It's pretty amazing how again, going back to that layer height and that DPI, how the filament printers have actually gotten that smaller and has gotten a lot more detail out of it. You'll still have to sand a little bit, but really it's pretty impressive on where that's going and how fast it's become. And again, who knows what's going to happen by, what new printer is going to come out next year that may even rival the resin printer in detail. Like it's definitely possible. Some more lives. We'll work on more lives. I've got a Cintiq. I've got the big, I don't know, it's probably 24-inch. It's probably not the best for my back. I definitely am hunched over. Again, I go back to that whole old school version of drawing on pen and paper. So to me, that's always felt more comfortable. I know I see a lot of the guys that have it sitting up and they're drawn like this and like a painting canvas. And that's never been, like, I've tried it and it just doesn't work for me, but I probably should because of my health and my back and my neck. But yeah, I still like the laying, having it laying down and hunched over, and it feels, it just, to me, it feels a little more immersive. But that's just me. That's 100% me. Yeah, no, I definitely, that should be something I'm working on, as far as getting that thing up here to where I'm doing this. Yeah, my future self will be definitely wanting that to happen. Yeah, no, I've definitely been I've been a Wacom guy for as long as I can remember. It's definitely, I hear a lot of good things on the X Pen. I know a lot of people really, really like it, and yeah, it's definitely, from a cost perspective, it's a lot better than a Wacom. Let's see here. Do I have a small keyboard? I just have my keyboard set up, so it's the tablet and then the keyboard, and then I can just go back and forth, up and down, and then I've got a monitor up top that I can, have whatever Discord or anything like that. As far as my pen goes, I definitely have a lot. I lean a lot on middle click and right click, especially in cinema. If I go back into cinema and I'm on a mouse, I'm pretty much useless, as far as, because I rely so much on bringing up menus from a right click and a left click. As far as doing this whole thing, like, Yeah, I need that. I couldn't find those menus otherwise, which is a little scary sometimes if you go into a different scenario and you go into a studio that's not set up or has what you need. It's like I'm useless. Do I make a sculpture and add a rig and pose? Yeah, I do. Absolutely, I do. Once I go from this little T pose, a lot of times what my kind of workflow from that is I keep him as the high res, so he's super detailed, super high poly, everything like that. I'll go in and Z remesh him down and keep all the different pieces and parts and things like that, as far as just as far as breaking it apart and things like that. And again, it's a really nice workflow to go from like 3D printing to physical painting to go into Cinema 4D back into to go back into like something like Substance Painter. It all works a lot of the same way in my brain. So I can go in and just have all these different pieces and parts and and take him in. And once he's into actually Substance Painter, you can go in and you can map those super high details onto this low poly, this low poly mesh of everything. This is probably a little too high, but again, you can kind of see, like, even on the backpack of like how low poly that is. And then once he gets into his whole thing, and just how good it actually looks. Got to render it out here. I have him in Redshift, but unfortunately, like my computer crashed over the weekend, and I have to reinstall my Redshift. So this one is in Octane. Hey, Cameron, how you doing, buddy? I miss your face. Have to hollow out model, add supports, and do a lot more. Not as easy as hitting print. Absolutely true. Hollowing out is super important, which is really, really massively important when you go to do the when you go in to do the Dynamesh. Like that's your cheat code. If you're having something trouble printing, just take all that geometry, put it in, and just Dynamesh it into, make it super high density polys and just Dynamesh it as one thing and then bring it back in. That saved me so many times of trying to cut things out and things like that, as far as that goes. Yep, I am licensed Octane. And I don't know why it's not rendering either. Okay. But yeah, so you can see like how all that extra little detail gets into these little nooks and crannies of everything. You know, there's no you know, again, that, you know, that just maps right on there, and it has, you know, it does an amazing job as far as the whole substance workflow goes. Again, you can just see how those come in there. I do use pretty much the standard Cinema 4D. Okay. Well, I think our time is up here. Oh, no weapons are like a sword. I did actually have a staff that he has. Oop. Get up here. That I ended up modeling out for him. And then gave him a little print as well. So anyway, yeah, thank you so much for joining me and spending the morning with me. Again, Ian will be back next week, and I guess we'll talk to everyone later, and we'll see you next time. Bye.